Bienvenidos to the Bronze Titan podcast on YouTube. I'm your host, Benjamin Ramos. I'm an independent journalist and longtime Cuba solidarity activist based here in New York City. And about once a month, I'll be bringing you a podcast from the international movement to end the U.S. blockade against Cuba. On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about this extraordinary conference that's taking place here in New York City. The actual title is the International U.S.-Cuba Normalization Conference. It's going to take place the weekend of March 15th to the 16th. With us today to talk more about this conference, the program, what we're going to see, hear, feel, all of that is Ike Neham of the New York, New Jersey Cuba Coalition. Welcome to the podcast again, Ike.
Thank you, Ben. Good to see you, and thank you for giving us this great platform to promote this very important conference that's taking place in the heat of all that's happened and is unfolding and happening in the Americas since Trump and Rubio took office again. And we're having this conference right in the thick of these events.
And let's get into that. Like, before we even talk about that, what's our context? I mean, Trump has been in office for a month and a week, and I don't know about you, it feels like it's been 4 years already. Tell us, what is the political context, especially around Cuba, that we're going into right now?
Well, it seems pretty clear, and I think this was anticipated by many in the movement. Certainly, we've been discussing it in Cuba C, that Trump has come out like guns blazing, or daggers drawn. And he's a lot of bluster, a lot of bombast. And in a sense, it's almost like a scattershot approach. He's shooting, the threats against Panama, against Mexico, and even at the same time, we know that Cuba is always the focus, because to them, it's like Cuba is the source of all their problems. That is, problems for capital in the Americas, because of the Cuban Revolution, which they've been trying to kill all these years. So we know that since Trump took office, and with Rubio as Secretary of State, that they have basically cut off remittances. We know that today there were new threats launched against Cuban medical internationalism and threats of sanctions against what they call, slave labor, just outrageous lies. We know that there's been visa restrictions, although, we expect that the Trump administration is probably going to have to comply. They will have to comply with the ability of the Cuban delegation to come to New York for the UN Commission on the Status of Women activities, which coincides with our conference, and we expect to have a large delegation of Cubans in Manhattan, in the heart of New York City, where we will welcome them. And that's what makes our important. The context that we've been talking about is what makes our conference very important, because it gives an orientation to the broader movement against the U.S. Economic war and political belligerence against Cuba, which is very important for the whole hemispheric struggle. In the same way that the U.S. sees Cuba as the source of the subversion and revolutionary sentiment and anti-imperialist sentiment in Latin America, at the same time, the example of Cuba continues. Anyway, this is why we're having the conference, and we're going to have a lot of workshops. Good gathering, I think, and we can go through the whole weekend. It's going to culminate in a great rally at the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Center on Saturday evening. This is the centenary year, as you know, of Malcolm X, his birth, and the last February 21st, just last week, a few days ago, we commemorated the 60th anniversary of his murder and assassination in New York City at the same space where our wonderful rally is going to take place on Saturday night.
Ike, tell us. Let's start with some ground rules. Where, when is the conference? And actually, let's make sure our audience knows this is an international conference. Who are some of the forces nationally and internationally that are involved? So start us off with the basics: the who, what, when, where, and why.
Well, the opening day will be Saturday, March 15th, and the venue at this point is going to be at the Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz Center, where we'll have a opening plenary. I think we can put on the screen or put the address for the for all the plenary, the workshops. Thank you. And then the rally on Saturday night. Sunday, we're going to have an activist session, which I think will be quite large, where we'll be discussing a plan of action. This is the opening plenary. We're going to have a broad array of speakers from the labor movement, Cuban Americans, and people in terms of your other question. Yes, this is an international conference. We are going to have Keith Bolender, for example, from Canada. A number of people from Canada are coming in. We're going to have Sister Solomar is going to Ortiz Jusino from Puerto Rico, from the Solidarity Movement on the island, is going to be live streaming a message, and she's also going to be giving greetings from the Latin American and Caribbean Solidarity Network. We're beginning to build broader links with the movement throughout the Americas, and this conference, I think, will register some of the advances in that regard. If we then we're going to show a video. Scroll back just a bit. There we go. That we're going to actually premiere at the conference, Belly of the Beast. Despite all the pressures and difficulties in Cuba as the U.S. continues its asphyxiation policy, its economic war against Cuba, even as this is deepening in Cuba, as anybody that goes to Cuba can testify to, the shortages and so on in the Cuban economy, Cuba is developing a breakthrough medication on Alzheimer's, and we're going to be having a short video that shows this. Then we're going to have the report back from the conference in Havana, which a number of people in New York went to, a big New York delegation. So again, we are uniting as many of the broad forces. We go back here, if we can click on the workshops, you can see the workshops that we're going to be having. Cuba and reproductive justice, Cuba and climate justice, labor unions standing with Cuba. This will be a wonderful workshop. Travel and material aid to Cuba, different brigades that are going. I know you're a veteran of the Venceremos Brigade, Ben, and we're going to have some good discussions on how all of us are going to unite all the different forces to send aid to Cuba to keep this issue visible, which is what we have to do.
And Ike, just very quick, because of course I'm inspired when I see travel material aid to Cuba. Are we going to be able to get a lot of information about the Mayday Brigade that's leaving in a few months?
Yes.
Wonderful.
That's at this workshop. Well, as you can see, the Mayday Brigade poster is up there. They'll be giving a report, and hopefully we'll still be able to sign people up. I know that's ongoing right now. All the different brigades going for May Day. And we may we'll have to see whether or not there's further travel restrictions between now and when our solidarity brigades are going to be going around May Day. In the last couple of years, we've been able to get a number of folks to go directly from the United States. There's been flights regularly for quite some time now going from Miami, not direct flights from New York anymore. But, these are the type of things that Trump and his gang are threatening to cut back on even further. We've been there before in our movement, but we'll have to see what the situation is by the time the brigades get ready to go in May and April.
So, folks in our listening audience, as we're screen sharing, you can see that the website is us-cubanormalization.org. When you go there, you'll be able to see the conference here. This is a wonderful flyer / countdown of how many days. We have 16 days, 13 hours, 30 minutes, and the seconds are ticking down. There's pre-registration. If I click on that, you'll see there's a registration form you get to fill out so that you're able to choose which workshops you want to participate in. What do you want to see during that day? Ike, so we're getting together. We're having this extraordinary conference. What is the end result? When I leave at the end of Saturday night, what is it that you want me to take back with me?
Well, I guess the continuity of struggle and thinking towards the rest of this year. I think we've laid out in our discussion so far tonight the context of which we are functioning as political people trying to end this blockade, but broader questions throughout the Americas, war and peace in the world. All these questions are posed very sharply right now. But in terms of what we're trying to do to come out of this conference with a plan of action that we're going to be discussing on Sunday at the People's Forum, the whole movement is going to get together, all the different tendencies and parties. We hope we can overcome or transcend, at least for that day, differences that we may have on other world political questions that are burning and are going to continue to burn. But in terms of uniting around a plan of action to defeat the blockade, it's certainly not going to be easy in the teeth of what Trump and Rubio are trying to do, but we have the potential to do it. There are a lot of people. Me and you are just at the tip of a very broad spear of people that are engaged, inspired by Cuba, that have taken this issue on and are committed to fight for it. And we think that can overcome that moral high ground that we have on this issue. It's like Fidel said, the battle of ideas. We think we can effectively fight all of their power and bluster and bombast that's now personified in Trump.
Just recently, and I believe between yesterday and today, I saw that there's some articles where Cuba's becoming very vocal about calling for Guantanamo to leave Cuba, that land be returned to the Cuban people. Are we seeing a resurgence in that work? It's been a long time since a lot of us have done work around Guantanamo and that kind of form of decolonization of Cuba. Do you think this is, in the next 4 years, going to be one of our new hot topics on top of all the other hot topics we have with Cuba?
Well, Trump is making it one. And, these threats, these, obnoxious, disgusting, racist threats to take these immigrants, workers that are coming to the United States to work, to say, please exploit me so I can, survive and work, that he's going to take them and dump them on illegally held Cuban territory. It's outrageous. And so this issue is, we've always demanded it. We've always demanded that, just like we demanded that Vieques, that they stop the bombing. I mean, a limited analogy, but you know what I mean. We've always demanded that Guantanamo is illegally held Cuban territory. We've always supported the demand that it be returned to Cuban sovereignty, and that issue is now right at the center again of all of Latin American concerns, because Trump is threatening to take workers that have been disrupted from their homelands because of U.S. policies more than anything else. It's U.S. policies in Honduras putting a narco-terrorist regime in power. It's U.S. policies in El Salvador, militarizing the country in the 1980s, creating a political vacuums that then became, filled by gangs, and then the consequences of that in terms of immigration. Same in Guatemala. And then in Venezuela, all the sanctions and belligerency ever since Chavez began really mild reforms upon being elected president. All of those things generated refugees and dislocation, and then they have the nerve to target these refugees that their policies have created. This is not going to fly politically,
So,
in my
folks,
opinion.
no, absolutely. I think I love how you said it's been this scattershot approach of repression and scattershot approach of just creating this environment of where he's breeding resistance. I mean, right now we're talking about Guantanamo, and Ike is right. We've always called for Guantanamo, but there is this heightened awareness of it, especially since Trump let the little secret out that this is nothing new. Those 30,000 jails, those 30,000 prison cells have been used for migrants and refugees for decades. It's just always been kind of hidden. Now we're very much aware of it, and now the Cuban people are putting it out. This is what's happening. We're not going to participate in Trump's, attack on working class people around the world. Our island is not going to be a prison for them. And it's very powerful to see Cuba standing up in this way, especially since Cuba 1 minute was on a list as sponsors of state terrorism, removed and then automatically put back the second Trump got in. What was it, Ike? It was within a day or two of his inauguration.
Well, the surprise there is not that Trump did that. The real point, anybody with any sense knew that he was going to exactly do that. What's really notable is the unbounded cynicism of the Biden administration at the very last minute, as a sop that they were throwing out to people on this issue where people have been pressing them for a long time, and they have consciously maintained endless reviews and BS to divert from the question. They kept Cuba on the list. They deepened the Trump sanctions from his first term, even during the pandemic, while Cuba was carrying out heroic medical internationalism. The U.S. was deepening its sanctions against Cuba under Biden. So that's cynicism for him at the last minute to take Cuba off the list. It has one positive consequence, which is that it will be very hard to within the Democratic Party, within that demoralized outfit right now and divided outfit right now, to maintain that there was ever any basis for Cuba being on that. But, there's still a whole layer in the Democratic Party that is kind of openly hostile on the same grounds as Marco Rubio to Cuba. But there's another layer that's, more divided on it.
Amazing. So, Ike, as we're wrapping up, let's go through it one more time. Let's look at that amazing website. Let's give a shout out to Cesar Sanchez for this amazing website with incredible workshops. Oh, look at that. Let me go back to home, folks. Make sure that you are registering. You're going to uscubanormalization.org. There's a pre-registration so that you can participate in the workshop that you're interested in. It's going to be a full day of networking, of education, of, like Ike said, building work, us taking up a call to arms. So one more time, folks, 2-day
We're
event,
trying
March
to
5th.
build a movement.
We're trying to
Only
build
a
a movement.
movement is going to be able to defeat this policy. A real grassroots movement that can affect forces that can end this policy.
Ike, we have the date on Saturday, March 15th. Tell us the time. What time should people be coming in?
Our plan is to start the program. We're live. This is being live streamed worldwide. We're going to start a little late so that we can accommodate folks on the West Coast. So I think the first session is going to start at 11 o'clock. But we are going to have all of that material on this. Some of it's there, some of it there. 9 to 11, registration and coffee. Opening plenary will start at 11. But we're going to be doing a full blitz, full throttle, as we say on the railroad, publicity over the next period. All of your listeners, I'm sure they're all progressive, or many of them are very progressive people involved in struggle. You will have your email boxes and your WhatsApp groups bombarded with material, and we hope you come. Come check it out. Come Saturday night to the rally. It's going to be very inspiring. We got Arturo Farrell, the wonderful Grammy Award-winning artist, is putting together a band. We're going to have dance music, speakers from the Cuban mission to the United Nations, from the delegation. In honor of Malcolm X, Rosemary Mealy's going to speak. She's going to talk about Malcolm X and Cuba. Zaid Mohammed's going to give a wonderful spoken word poetry. We're going to have a presentation to the Cuban delegation from children in Harlem. So it's going to be a great evening Saturday night after all the networking on Saturday during the day.
Wonderful. So, folks, we need you there. We need you there. We're building a movement. We need as many communities and folks possible to represent, and take this information back. Go back to your unions, go back to your churches, go back to your civic groups, go back to all the organizations you can. Maybe we can start, the folks from Cuba C and the National Network on Cuba have been wonderful about getting proposals and getting resolutions passed and resolutions placed out there so that folks can see just the breadth of support. And as you can see from this conference, there's going to be folks from labor, from all youth sectors, from folks who travel on a yearly, annual basis. So there's a lot for folks to see. And again, folks, it's being live streamed. For those of you on YouTube that are saying, Ike, Ben, I'm not in New York City. You guys keep all this stuff in New York City. It's being live streamed, folks. So when you pre-register, you'll be able to get the live stream link and you'll be able to see it and participate virtually. Again, just as a closing thing, Ike, we have a lot of work to do in the next 4 years. We have a conservative, demagogic nightmare of a president. When I ask you, what is it? How can we win? What can we do to get Cuba off that list, to get Guantanamo back to us, so that we can end this blockade? It always goes back to the blockade, folks. As much as we haven't said anything about the blockade, it's always about the blockade. What is it that we have to do? What's our call to action?
Well, in this year of Malcolm X, he always had a way of putting things that really got to the essence of it. When I look at Trump with all his bombast and all his bluster and all his threats, it's like Malcolm said, the difference between the fox and the wolf. Biden was not really interested in elevating Cuba and the Americas as a public thing. He carried out his reactionary anti-Cuba policy without trying to be on the radar. Trump is more in your face. He's more like the wolf as opposed to the fox, as Malcolm put it. So this has to guide how we act. It's always a question of pressure from below. It's always a question of building the grassroots and building a movement. But like we talked about earlier, they do a lot of our organizing for us. They're galvanizing people. Marx said the same thing. Capital develops its own gravedigger, and that's the working class. And I think that across the Americas, working people are bound to be set in motion by these attacks. We didn't even talk about Mexico, the threats on Mexico and how important that is. We're going to be bringing this issue into the conference. So it's always struggle, Ben. You know that. I know that. And we're lucky, not lucky. We have a history in New York City of unity and struggle, and we're going to show that in the next period as we're fighting this blockade.
And the first steps, folks, those of you that are listening, whether you're in the tri-state area, New York, Puerto Rico, or around the country, around the nation, first step is this conference. Let's start organizing. Let's get to know each other. Let's start meeting. So, mi gente, this is your February edition of the Bronze Titan. Thank you so much to Ike. Thank you for your analysis, Ike. Thank you for being with us. Ike is always going to be invited. There's always going to be a need for his analysis, his perspective. Thank you so much for listening to our listening audience as well. We're going to do the YouTube commercial, folks. Please subscribe to the channel. Turn on your notifications. Share, like, do all of that good stuff. If you liked this podcast, share it with friends. Try to get a whole bunch of you together to do a watch party for the conference. We need people to hear this information and do what they can with it. So again, like, share, subscribe, turn on the notifications. We post about once a month. You'll be getting another Bronze Titan in March in a few weeks. Como siempre, Cuba sí, bloqueo no.